I actually saw a news article that 97% of podcasts fail before episode 5, which is a crazy statistic. Well, I can assure you, it's not this one. Hey, yo, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to Communications and Health. It's been a while, but I am back here. I actually saw a news article that 97% of podcasts fail before episode 5, which is a crazy statistic. Well, I can assure you, it's not this one. So today, we're going to be joined with another special guest. Her name is Karina Butani, and she has been doing research into Parkinson's disease. Hello, Karina.
Hi.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I actually went to Washington University in St. Louis. I graduated last year in August. I majored in neuroscience, minored in psychology, and I got the opportunity to work in Dr. Megan Campbell's lab, which specifically examined Parkinson's disease.
You sound very accomplished. And are you applying to medical school now?
Yes, I am currently applying and I have taken a gap year. So I'm working right now as a medical assistant at an orthopedic clinic right now.
Lovely to have you on the show today. So let's just dive in. So, what exactly is Parkinson's disease?
Yeah, so Parkinson's, it's a neurological disorder. It's characterized by a lot of motor and non motor symptoms. But basically, it's caused by a neuron loss in the brain in a specific area called the substantia nigra, causing a loss of dopamine. And some of the symptoms that can be associated with it are tremors, hand shaking, freezing of gait, in which people have a hard time walking and they get stuck in place. And then there's also, visual hallucinations, mood changes such as depression because of the loss of dopamine. And then you progressively slow over time. So it takes about 10 to 15 years to get to a really advanced stage, which is a good thing. At least it's a slow moving disorder. And the exact cures aren't known. So right now it's pretty hard to cure. People just take dopamine supplements as a form of medication for it.
So, you said there was no cure. So, are there any more treatments besides these dopamine supplements that doctors would prescribe?
There are a few that are currently being looked into. Deep brain stimulation is one. Um, so that has shown some significant improvement. But other than the medications, there's really not a lot we have out there, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, hopefully we'll see some breakthroughs coming in later years. So, you conducted lots of research on Parkinson's, correct?
Yeah, so I actually was interested in Parkinson's because my grandpa had Parkinson's. So I lived with him for my whole life, and I kind of saw him progressively slow down over time until I was 16 or 17 years old. And I saw the majority of his symptoms. So he had hallucinations, he was taking the dopamine supplements as medication. I saw his mood changes. I noticed his hands would shake. And over time, he did get slower. So that kind of inspired my search into research and kind of inspired me to go into Parkinson's in particular. And I actually found this lab. It was a neurology lab. It has a bunch of undergraduate students, graduate students, and then just other lab members, nurses who are part of the two studies and conduct research in Parkinson's.
So, going into your research, can you give some insight into what specifically you were conducting?
Yeah, so going into the lab, I really didn't know what I wanted to explore in particular. So I conducted a bunch of literary reviews, read a lot of publications, um, and I found that I was interested in a lot of the psychiatric symptoms. As a psychology minor, I found myself interested in looking at, depression, anxiety, apathy, and kind of like the psychosis and hallucinations that comes along with the disease. And I found that that area was often overlooked. A lot of people often look at the motor components, and they perform gait analysis, or they look at the cognitive aspects. But I found that the psychiatric aspect was didn't have a lot of research already on it. So I wanted to pursue research in that area. And I actually looked at the relationship between the psychiatric symptoms and dementia and Parkinson's disease, because there is a lot of dementia in Parkinson's. And a lot of people, it's actually called Parkinson's disease dementia. So a lot of patients do exhibit that. So I kind of wanted to look at the relationship between the two.
So I have a question. Did you actually find a connection between Parkinson's and dementia?
Yeah, so I looked at a cross sectional relationship and a longitudinal relationship. So, cross sectional would be if they have it at the same time, and then longitudinal would be if the psychiatric symptoms somehow could predict dementia. And what I found was that there was a cross sectional relationship for each of the categories. So, depression, anxiety, apathy, and visual hallucinations with dementia. Over time, I would say the longitudinal component, I didn't have enough data. So it was pretty inconclusive in terms of the longitudinal aspect. Um, yeah.
So you also mentioned that you were working in a lab for how many years was it?
It was 2 years. I started in the fall of 2019.
So like the COVID year, right?
Before COVID, right before COVID. Yeah.
Okay. So how was it working in a lab? Like, did you have a group or a team you were with like analysts or like people you like a whole kind of lab group?
Yeah, so I actually had a principal investigator. She kind of led me through everything, led me through the process, developed questions or helped me develop questions, hypotheses, methods um, for my project. And it was really cool because I got to create an individualized project, which was a really unique opportunity as an undergraduate. And then there was other lab members, undergrad students who were also interested in Parkinson's, plus the graduate students and then the nurses. So everyone kind of had like their own role in the lab, which was really nice. Um, for us, we had to work together, the lab members, in data collection and creating a database for our project. So we would use the two Parkinson studies that they had, and a lot of the nurses would go and interview patients. And at each of their visits, they would ask them cognitive questionnaires or psychiatric questionnaires, and that's how we would get the data. And we would be in charge of entering that data into Excel to be able to be used in a project. So we all had to get the data done in the fall so that we could work on our projects in the spring. So it was kind of like a team-based effort, which was nice. And everyone kind of worked on specific points of data entry for their own project. So I was in charge of the psychiatric questionnaires. And each of these patients were interviewed every year or every 3 years, depending on the study. And some even went up to 9 years. So these studies would follow these patients longitudinally for 9 years, which was quite a bit of time.
So when you're working in the lab with your group, what like challenges did you have to overcome like together, and how did you manage to all be organized and function?
Yeah, I think so. I guess the challenges were that we were inexperienced. So it was hard to kind of navigate something without knowing anything about it, like all of the Excel, creating a database, even coming up with the questions and hypotheses. We'd never really done that before, so it was all kind of new to us. So it was a learning experience for us. And then I guess the number of participants was actually pretty hard to come up with as well, for the longitudinal aspect, since not a lot of patients are going to be followed for 9 years. Things happen. Either they're not able to be followed or they're not consistent with their visits. So it is hard to get accurate data for that component. which is why my data was inconclusive for that part. I think other challenges, I would say, just the project in general, coming up with the covariates, coming up with the design. Um, that was very challenging, but I would say our principal investigator really helped us through the process. And we were all kind of there for each other as lab members as well, which was really nice.
So, what advice would you give to anyone pursuing like a field or a career that has to work in a lab and like that they could learn from your experiences?
Yeah, I think like just finding what you're passionate about and kind of going after it. For me, clinical research, it was pretty fun because it was in an area that I really was interested in, and I had prior background with it with my grandfather. So I would say just reaching out to people is probably the first step. Reaching out to PIs, to doctors that practice research, um, and just taking a look at their work. I think that's the first step. And then I think second would be determining what type of research you want to do. Clinical research isn't for everyone. You are at a computer all the time. It's a lot of data collection, data entry, and it's different from the typical type of research at a bench or a lab. So I think just finding what you are passionate about would be the first step for research.
Okay, that's very helpful for anyone pursuing a field or a career that has to do with lab work. So getting back to your findings, though, what would you do if you had to continue like the research in the area that you were pursuing?
Yeah, so I think that over time, I hope that we get more participants. If I was to continue in the same lab, I would continue looking at the longitudinal component and seeing maybe if there is a predictor between those psychiatric symptoms and dementia. And I think I would explore more into dementia and the actual brain scans. So the protein levels in the brain, or I would look at brain scans and kind of see how that parallels the psychiatric symptoms and dementia. Because I think that aspect is really cool. You're able to see, the specific mechanisms and science behind all of the symptoms, which I would really be interested in taking a look at in the future.
That all sounds very interesting. I think that's gonna do it for today.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I mean, we learned a lot about Parkinson's, a lot about how it is working in the lab. Thank you for sharing, by the way. Um, Thank you for every one of our viewers for tuning in. Like I said, I know it's been a while, but we're back. I told you we're not gonna fail before 5 podcasts. Besides, we're gonna beat the statistics. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for tuning in. Remember, we're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. You can also look at our website down in the link below. Newly made website. It's very nice. Thank you for joining us, Karina, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.